You are wearing clothes right now. You probably put them on without thinking. You would feel deeply uncomfortable without them in public. The idea of going through your day naked feels wrong in a way that is hard to even explain. But why? Not why in the modern sense. Why did it start? What was the actual first reason a human being picked something up and decided to cover their body with it? The answer that gets taught in school is simple. It was cold. Humans moved into colder climates and needed insulation. Problem solved. Except that answer is almost certainly wrong, or at least massively incomplete. Because when scientists actually looked at the evidence, what they found was much stranger, much more interesting, and honestly, way more human than anything you learned in a classroom. Let's start with the lice. Yes, lice. This is not glamorous, but it is genuinely one of the most precise pieces of biological evidence scientists have ever found about early human behavior. Human beings have two distinct species of lice. Head lice, known as Pediculus humanus capitis, which live in scalp hair, and body lice, known as Pediculus humanus corporis, which live exclusively in clothing. Here's the critical detail. Body lice cannot survive without clothing. They cannot complete their reproductive cycle on skin alone. They need the specific microenvironment of fabric or animal hide to lay their eggs, regulate temperature, and sustain a population. Remove the clothing and the body lice population collapses within days. This biological dependency means that the existence of body lice as a distinct species is direct evidence of sustained clothing use. You cannot have body lice without clothing. The two are biologically inseparable. So scientists asked the obvious question: when did body lice diverge from head lice? Using mitochondrial DNA analysis to trace the genetic divergence between the two species, researchers could pinpoint approximately when humans began wearing clothing consistently enough for a new species to evolve. The answer, published in a 2003 study by Mark Stoneking and colleagues at the Max Planck Institute, was approximately 170,000 years ago. Not 100,000 years ago when humans first expanded into cold climates. Not 50,000 years ago. 170,000 years ago. In Africa, where temperatures were not dramatically different from today, humans started wearing clothes tens of thousands of years before the climate required it. So what was actually driving it? The first hypothesis researchers take seriously is insect protection. Not cold, insects. In tropical and subtropical Africa, the insect pressure on bare human skin is enormous. Mosquitoes carrying malaria and other vector-borne diseases. Tsetse flies transmitting trypanosomiasis, biting midges. Ticks carrying bacterial infections. In the ancient world, before any medical knowledge or treatment, a single infected bite could kill within days. The human body lost most of its hair somewhere between 1.5 and 2 million years ago, likely as an adaptation for more efficient thermoregulation during persistence hunting. Sweating cools the body far more effectively without dense fur. But that same loss of hair dramatically increased the skin surface area accessible to biting insects. A simple piece of animal hide draped over the torso, shoulders, and legs would reduce exposed skin area by roughly 60 to 70%. Not eliminate the insect problem entirely, but reduce it to a level where the mortality impact was substantially lower. In evolutionary terms, the individuals who covered their skin had better survival odds. Over generations, that behavioral advantage would have been selected for and reinforced culturally. It may have been pest control, and in a world where insects were a primary vector of fatal disease, pest control was the same thing as survival. But here is where it gets more interesting. Because researchers believe clothing started serving social functions very quickly, possibly simultaneously with the practical ones. Think about what clothing does beyond covering skin. It marks you. In early tribal life, the ability to identify group membership at a distance was not a social nicety. It was a survival calculation. In a world where encountering strangers could mean anything from potential trade to immediate violence, rapid visual identification of in-group versus out-group membership could be the difference between a peaceful interaction and a fatal one. Clothing, body paint, deliberate scarification, and ornamentation all served this function. They transformed a naked primate into a visually legible member of a specific group. Archaeologists have found compelling evidence of body ornamentation going back over 100,000 years. Ochre pigment, clearly used for body decoration, has been found at Blombos Cave in South Africa in deposits dated to at least 75,000 years ago. Perforated shell beads used as jewelry have been found at sites in North Africa dated to 130,000 years ago. Long before tailored clothing existed, humans were already investing significant effort in modifying their appearance as a form of social communication. Clothing became an extension of this same system. What you wore, what it was made from, how it was decorated, all communicated information about who you were and which group you belonged to. This is not a trivial detail. In a world of competing tribal groups, being recognizable as one of us at a glance had real survival value. And then there is the dimension that nobody discusses in a classroom, but which evolutionary biology suggests was probably central to the whole story: attraction. Clothing is one of the most powerful tools of sexual signaling in the entire documented history of human behavior, and this is almost certainly not a modern cultural invention. There is a well-established principle in evolutionary psychology called the contrast effect. Partial concealment of the body draws attention to what is visible in a way that complete exposure does not. Covering certain areas while revealing others creates visual contrast and triggers attention. It introduces mystery into an interaction in a way that uniform exposure eliminates entirely. This is not a cultural prejudice. It has been documented across dozens of cultures with varying standards of dress and modesty, and the underlying attentional and arousal responses to partial concealment appear to be largely consistent across populations. Early humans did not understand the mechanism, but they experienced the outcome. The individuals who used clothing and body decoration to signal attractiveness more effectively had greater mating success. Over thousands of generations, that feedback loop became embedded in how humans think about clothing and personal appearance at a neurological level. This is why getting dressed feels like it matters. Why choosing what to wear feels like a decision with real stakes even when nothing practical is at risk. Your brain is running an ancient program that evolved when the stakes were genuinely high. Your prehistoric ancestors were using strategically placed animal hides to appear more interesting to other prehistoric humans. You are running the same program every morning. There is also the status dimension, which operated in parallel with everything else. In a tribal society with no money, no formal hierarchy, and no written records of achievement, your social standing was communicated entirely through observable signals. What you did, how you carried yourself, what you wore. Clothing made from the hide of a particularly dangerous animal you had personally hunted was not just warmth. It was a trophy worn on your body every day. It was a visible, continuous broadcast of what you were capable of. The first luxury goods in human history were almost certainly clothing and personal ornamentation. Not because people had surplus time and resources to spend on aesthetics, but because those items carried information about the person wearing them that was genuinely valuable to everyone around them. Researchers studying modern hunter-gatherer societies have documented elaborate systems of clothing and ornamentation that function primarily as status signaling. The Dani people of Papua New Guinea, the Mursi of Ethiopia, numerous indigenous groups across South America all maintain complex systems of dress that communicate social rank, life experience, and group affiliation with a precision that rivals any formal uniform system. There is no reason to believe ancient humans were any different. The psychological hardware that drives status signaling through appearance is old, much older than agriculture or civilization. All of these functions developed and reinforced each other over tens of thousands of years. Insect protection led to consistent hide wearing, which created the social conditions for clothing to become identity signaling, which made it attractive to invest more effort in the quality and decoration of what you wore, which amplified status signaling, which amplified attraction signaling, which made clothing progressively more central to human social life. And then, eventually, the climate changed the equation again. When humans moved into colder environments, the practice of wearing clothing was already deeply embedded in human culture for reasons entirely unrelated to warmth. The thermal insulation was a bonus layered on top of a behavior that had been socially indispensable for tens of thousands of years. By the time humans were surviving Ice Age winters in fitted sewn garments, clothing had already been part of human social life for at least 70,000 years. The technology that made cold climate survival possible, the bone needle, deserves its own moment here. Bone needles with eyes for threading have been found at archaeological sites across Europe and Asia going back 50,000 years. The oldest known example was discovered at Denisova Cave in Siberia and dates to approximately 50,000 years ago. It is 7 centimeters long with a hole drilled through one end using a stone drill bit small enough to thread sinew. Think about what that required: identifying an appropriate bone, shaping it to the correct dimensions using stone tools, creating a drill bit fine enough to punch a hole through bone without cracking it, threading sinew through that hole, and then using the whole assembly to join pieces of hide together with enough precision to create a fitted garment that would hold heat against the body in -30-degree temperatures. That is not primitive technology. That is sophisticated engineering applied to a specific functional problem by someone who understood exactly what they were trying to achieve. So here is what clothing actually is. Not warmth, not modesty, not a simple response to a simple problem. Clothing is one of the oldest and most sophisticated social technologies in human history. It emerged approximately 170,000 years ago, not because humans were cold, but because it protected against insects, communicated tribal identity, signaled social status, and amplified attractiveness. It was doing all of those things simultaneously and continuously before a single stitch had ever been sewn. When the climate eventually demanded thermal protection, clothing was already so embedded in human culture that the engineering leap to fitted sewn garments was not a new invention. It was the next iteration of something humans had been developing and refining for the better part of 100,000 years. Every time you choose what to wear, you are participating in a communication system older than agriculture, older than writing, older than every city and civilization that has ever existed. The outfit you put on this morning is doing exactly what human clothing has always done. It is telling the world something about who you are. It has been doing that for 170,000 years. Please like and subscribe.